So, just a quick one for people watching on YouTube. There's other sessions of these that are available on YouTube on different topics. Just a vet who wants to be an illustrator. Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, so there's other talks that are available on various topics related to being an artist. This is going to be on my Instagram story for another 24 hours. If you can't stay for the whole thing, then just catch it on catch up. We've been having some on-topic ones, and then we had some open-topic ones, and now we're having a kind of mixture of both, where we're having a kind of specific topic, but it's kind of open in the sense that we'll just see where the conversation takes us. Tolu, welcome. So I think I'll start. I did, even though I said I wasn't going to prepare, I have had some thoughts, because I don't know why leadership sort of came to mind. Smugger12, welcome. I'm not sure what the thinking was. I think maybe it's still an offshoot of this landmark, workshop I did, because that coaching about, get your attention off yourself really, as you can tell, because I keep bringing it up, it really did impact me quite a lot. I've been someone who, for various reasons, I have been thinking about me a lot, more than probably I needed to, for my own sort of safety or well-being, but you grow up into a way of being and a way of thinking where you don't realise that you're actually safe, and you don't need to have your thoughts on yourself all the time, if that makes sense. So when I get this coaching, get your attention off yourself, it's just like, you mean it's safe out there if I'm not constantly checking in and making sure that I'm being taken care of, or that I've got what I need, or whatever? You can actually think about other things, like other people. So that was quite a big deal. And I think probably maybe the leadership thing came into it, because I'm thinking, well, what's the next stage? If your attention isn't on yourself, then what is it on? Hello, Stamp Radish, welcome. Just got started. So what is it on? Well, then I guess the thing that you could put your attention on is other people and how other people are doing, and things maybe even that you could do for other people, and maybe even how you could be like an example or a leader for them. So I guess that's where the leadership thing came up for me this week, or why it came up. By the way, feel free to jump in with comments and thoughts, questions, whatever. I'm gonna try and it's a little dance I have to do with the comments to read them out, but also not lose my flow. So forgive me if it takes me a while to get back round to what you said. I will come back to them, but I'm gonna not read out the ones that aren't on topic. Because I realised last week I was just reading all of them, and I was reading stuff about stand up and other things, and sometimes people comment about what socks am I wearing, and I don't think we need to have those read out. So I guess the starting point, I suppose, is like what is leadership. And I think that a lot of people think of it as whoever is in charge, which in the normal world, I think that totally makes sense. It's like, who's the governor, who's the boss, who makes the decisions, who can hire and fire and stuff like that. That's the leader sort of thing. But leadership, I think, is different. And I think that people are missing an opportunity maybe if they don't start to have leadership in their own lives in a different way. I'm just going to go back to see what Paul says. I've been the opposite for too long. I was in service of others for too long and neglected myself. We need to find the balance now. First of all, hi Kat, hi BBC84, welcome back, hi Rob Horn. That's a good point, Paul. But I think, try this on for size. When you are in service of other people to your own detriment, I think that is a version of having your attention on yourself, because it's kind of martyrdom. Now, I don't know your situation. I don't know exactly what you're talking about. So you may go, fuck you, that it wasn't martyrdom. I just had a lot of things I had to do for other people. But if you're not leadership, like putting other people or thinking of other people should never mean that you genuinely are suffering, because that's a different thing. That's a martyrdom, and that never serves anybody, because there's a meme or saying or whatever, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like, you have to make sure that you're filled up first before you can give to other people. So I say that is pulling from the same well, and that there is the balance that you're talking about, I think, is finding a way to make sure that you are always aware of meeting your own needs, but not becoming obsessive about it. Because I think I'm the opposite of you, in the sense that my attention on myself showed up as, but what about me? Whereas yours is, maybe, I'm just putting it out there, what can I do for other people? How can I show up in these people's lives as a giver and a helper, even though it's draining or drawing from me detrimentally? Does that make sense? Does that sound fair? Does that sound like close to it, or does it sound like bollocks? Please, honestly, feel free to say. Hey, Kat. Right, so Paul says martyrdom runs in the family, then he does an emoji, but some thumbs up. So okay, so we might be on something. Hey, Ike, what's up? And Tanya SML has joined the conversation. So just for those who just joined, this is Creativity Live Chat. We do it every week, and this week is about leadership. I'm not really sure how it relates to specifically to being a creative, but I'm sure that there's a way that we can, that by the end of it, that we'll have woven in some useful thoughts. But I don't want to make it up, do you know what I mean? I don't want to just say it for the sake of it. I want it to be real. So in the real world, sort of, I always imagine offices whenever I'm thinking of the real world. But in the real world, leadership, yeah, sure, it can mean the person in charge. But I think there is an opportunity that we can all get in on, of having a bit of leadership in our own life. And that's where I would change the definition of what being a leader or having leadership is. Steve, you said you couldn't make it, but you're here, and I'm happy to see you. And Any Robot, welcome to the conversation. So I had made some notes. But before I read or go through my notes, Citizen Joke says, to be a leader is not easy, but it's not rocket science either. First thing is to listen, second is to communicate. Steve says his lunch was cancelled. Okay, cool. Kylie says, my paintings are in the service of the viewers. I wouldn't feel the drive if I was the only person on the planet, so to speak. It fills my spirit to help others access the place I've gone in making my art. That's brilliant. I mean, I think that both of what Citizen Joke and Carly have said there is kind of what I'm alluding to. So instead of dancing around it, I'll get to it. This is what I reckon leadership is or could be in our lives. Because I think what a lot of people want to do is they want to make somebody else responsible. Oh, quite often. And I think we all do it, is we don't want to be the one who's to blame, because we think that whoever's in charge is responsible for everything. And so therefore we're never, it's never our fault. And we can always refer it up. I remember having a job where I would constantly be taking my problems to my boss. And I'd be like, I worked in post-production. I used to book edit suites. So I'd go, such and such edit suite isn't available. I don't know what to do. And I would constantly be doing this, because as far as I was concerned, it was his problem. He's the governor. If I can't sort it out, he has to. And one day he goes to me, what about a solution? How would you solve this problem? And it stunned me, because I was just like, what are you talking about? It's not my problem. It's your problem, because I'm telling you about it. And that's an example of where we, where people don't take the opportunity to be leaders in their own lives. So it's not like I'm saying now I'm the boss, but what I could have done is said, let me figure out, see if I can find some solutions. Let me try and work something out. And then if I really get stuck, or I need some authority to be able to do something, then let me go to my leader, but let me take a solution to him. So I think that leadership, there's two domains really, because there's the leadership that we can have in our own lives of just sort of stepping up really and taking responsibility. There's a Will Smith video that he did recently, and he was talking about how being responsible for something doesn't mean that you're to blame. But but you as a leader, I think, in your own life, you have the opportunity to take responsibility for something, for things. For example, he was talking about, say your dad left your family home when you were young. Your dad is to blame for that. You're not to blame for that, but you are responsible for the fallout from it in your own life as an adult. Because that's exactly like what happened to me, and I was sort of bewildered for many, many years around this issue. Like, I was like, how could he do this? And a few drinks and time, and I'm like, ah. But as time's gone on, I've been able to separate the two and realize, right, he did what he did, but I can't live out of what the sort of residual impact on me was forever, and say that was his fault too. At some point, it becomes my responsibility. So I think that's one way that leadership can show up in your own life, is just being responsible for the shit that's in your life and not making it somebody else's fault. It's so easy to blame other people. It's just so easy. But leadership and leadership in that respect of being responsible is just so hard. Going back, Citizen Joke says, management by fear will not work. No, it doesn't. Any Robot says, for me, a big part of leadership is never asking someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, from cleaning a toilet to going to a war zone. That's an interesting one. Oh, that's interesting. Steen18 has joined. Welcome back. And Citizen Joke says, good leader lets others grow, so it's important to listen and to understand. Yeah, I think you said earlier it's about, listening and communication. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Some of the notes that I made. So one of the ideas that I quite like about leadership is that being a leader, whether it is a leader of a group of people or just a leader in your own life, and those are the two domains I think really that are most significant in this conversation, the types of leadership. I think it's quite an interesting idea that you're a space for something to happen. Like, you have your arms around this whole project. Say, for example, if you're say a team leader or something, you have your arms around the whole project, and within the space that you create, that's where the project exists. That's the sort of leadership. But to be able to be that space, you've got to be listening, like Citizen Joke is saying. You've got to be in tune with what's going on and what everybody needs, and making sure that everyone's able to function as a well-oiled machine. Do you know what I mean? And if something's not right for somebody, if something isn't working for somebody, if somebody isn't working within that sort of well-oiled machine that you're trying to create, then it's your responsibility to do something about it. Yeah. I'm just figuring this out as we go along, so bear with me. Steve, that's such a good point. So Steve says, I don't think leaders are always in charge nor at the front. First off, this is why I think being a leader in your own life is so important. So rather than, being in this default position, if you've got someone senior to you, of saying, oh, well, obviously it's not my responsibility because they're in charge and I'm not. When people are leaders in their own lives, it means that they're not dependent on the leader. They are almost supporting through what they're also the space for this project or thing or whatever it is that's happening, so that it isn't all about that one person at the top. That was the chair. It sounded like I farted, but it wasn't. It was a chair. I won't do it again now, as is always the way. But you're being responsible for creating this space that this thing will be, whatever it is. Just to go back on a previous point and then come back to your point, also, the space doesn't have to be a project with other people. It doesn't have to be, a project that basically involves other people. You can be the space for your own creative work. So where, sometimes you get artists talk about, oh, I can't do this because I don't have a camera, or I don't have money to buy art equipment, or I don't have whatever the reasoning. That is not coming from a place of responsibility and leadership in your own life. If you were to say, I am the space for my photographs to be shown in an exhibition, and then you orientate yourself in that way, that's a much more powerful way to approach your work. So there's the space in which a project and people can be, but there's also a space which is just about you, but also in which your work can occur. And then Steve, so going back to the point you were making about leaders aren't always at the front, I read this really interesting book called Catching Fire, and it was about oh God, what was the point of the book? I can't even remember now. But anyways, the bit of it that I really liked. Oh, it was about anyway, it's gone again. It's about, the bit that I really liked was about Navy SEALs. And it was talking about how they have this kind of, when they're on a mission, or whatever, I don't know the technical term for any of it, but when they're on a mission, they have this sort of tipping point where they are totally the ears and eyes for everybody else in their unit, that no one is leading and no one is following. They all naturally sort of circulate. It's almost like a flock of birds kind of thing. They get that thing, you know, when birds move and it's impossible to tell who, you know, which bird is at the front and which bird is making the decision to move. But somehow they I think they call it the switch or something like that, where this point where they tip into this sort of mindset. And it is a mindset. They've measured the sort of brain sort of function when, you know, SEALs are in this headspace, and it is a different headspace that they go into. The book is about flow. That's it. It's about how to get into like the flow states, how to generate it, and it talks about how other people have done that. Hive mind, exactly, Paul. So when, imagine a team where everybody was open enough to allow themselves to be hive mind, flow state, you know, to experience the switch. And I think we've all experienced that from time to time, where things are just moving so perfectly, so brilliantly, and there's no, you know, I think it takes a little bit of setting the ego aside, doesn't it? Because like, if you set the ego aside, then you are available you're not trying to impose your will on how things should be. You just sense this is what's called for next, and you sense when you need to just shut the fuck up, or, you know, let somebody else take the front, or now it's your time to lead, or you need to throw in your. Do you know what I mean? A leader serves to lead. A leader serves to lead. Tolu, please say a little bit more about that. I'm not quite sure I understand. Citizen Joke says, and as we said last week, to be good at it, you have to practice and learn from the mistakes. Absolutely. It's a skill, but it's not a skill that you can learn from a book. You have to learn from practical experience, and you have to, you just have to be open to acquiring the skill or the experience. And it's going to be bumpy ride. Carly asked, what's the book called again? It's called Catching Fire, and it's by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. And it's a book that Jason Silver recommends, actually, and that's the reason I bought it. I thought this flow state thing was really interesting, so I had a look, and it's a really good book. Cool, no worries. Citizen Joke, there's something else that your comment has made me think of. I can't think of it just now. Okay, let me go back to my notes, unless anyone else has any. Oh, hang on, Steve says ego. And you also need to take money out of the equation. People will float if they feel they are not going to be exploited emotionally and financially. I'm not gonna necessarily agree with that. Charles Tavigel SRL, because the only reason is that you can have a flow state when you're at work and money's involved there. It's not the primary objective of why you might enter the flow state, but money's, I don't know how you take money out of the equation completely. Directly you can take money out of the equation, but indirectly you can't, because ultimately, you know, if you're creating work, you're probably going to want to get paid for it. So I'm not sure about that one. I definitely think that the ego, if not disappears, is certainly diminished when one is in that flow, sort of open leadership space. You were talking ground flow. Ground flow? Is that what you meant to, right? Group flow. You don't want to use you don't want to be using money as the motivation for. Anyways, look, the thing is, you have to be the space for flow to turn up. You can't go, right, guys, we're all going to be in the flow state to be able. The only way we can get this done is if we're in flow state. You have to generate flow state. You have to be the stand for flow state. You have to be the space for it. That's what I was thinking of. In fact, you've all prompted this thought. So there's this. So I was on this course, and it's sort of personal development thing, and part of the training is to sort of take on these kind of production roles where you actually provide, your service provider, you provide the program that people are participating in. And one of the part of the course supplies catering for the participants. And the guy who runs the kitchen is a very straight talking guy, and sometimes he will, and I've been in this position, he will ball out the person who is the catering manager for him to get what he wants done, sort of thing. And what occurred to me is that, because he said one time, he goes, hi Nick James and Amelia Haley, he goes, I'm not shouting at you, I'm shouting at the person who is in the space called catering manager. And I thought that was such an interesting concept. Does that make sense? I'm sometimes not very good at explaining what I mean, but basically he was saying that this isn't personal, this isn't about you. You are occupying a space. You are a stand for this space called catering manager, and therefore, if there is a fuck up that is related to your domain as catering manager, I'm going to let you know about it. And I thought to myself, yes, that is because you can step into and step out of these spaces, but when you're in them, you are responsible. A powerful way to be is to be 100% responsible for the space that you're stepping into. That, I think, is leadership. Of saying, yeah, I get it, I'm the catering manager, and I'm not going to take this personally, this bawling out that I'm receiving. I'm just going to get the communication. It was a strong communication, but it wasn't bullying, it wasn't like bad, it was just strong. And I'm going to, take on whatever I need to get done what he needs to get done. So I think that's one sort of concept that could be quite useful in life, because I think that's what people in sort of political roles, or in all kinds of roles, they are the space for a particular thing. So when you go and see your doctor, you're not seeing Dr. Jones or Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, you're seeing Dr. Jones, and they are a stand for the space called doctor. They're not going to start chatting with you about stuff or telling you how bad their day was or whatever. They are a stand for the space called doctor, and they fulfill that obligation fully and completely if they're a good doctor. And I guess in some way, as artists, maybe that's what we want in our lives, is to be, when we're in our lives, be a stand for whatever or be a space for what we've said we're making a stand to create. And one thing about people who occupy a space is that they take responsibility for everything that pertains to that space. They're not talking about blaming somebody else, or not taking responsibility, basically. I think that one of the other things about leadership is that you give up or you have to let go of your right to complain, which is, again, tough. Because when you're in a leadership role, it's not that you don't have the right to complain. Yeah, sure, complain if you want to. But if you've got people looking to you for guidance or whatever, the last thing they need to know from you is how your day was. I remember my agent saying to me quite recently, actually, she said, we were just talking about the challenges of her job and, how that sits with her. And she said, like, one of the things that I just never do is I never tell my clients how my day is. Like, when the phone call starts, you do the niceties, how are you? But she says, I will never say, if I'm having a bad day, I'm not gonna let you know, because that's not leadership. She didn't say those words, like, that's not leadership. I'm just saying to you, that's not leadership, because then what? Then I start counselling her or something? That's not the nature of the relationship. When she calls me, she's occupying the space called agent, not friend. We can have friend conversations and do that, but that's not her responsibility when she comes into that phone call, and she knows that. So I thought that was really interesting that, she, she felt that, or was aware of it. I thought that was a good example of, like, where you relinquish your right to complain. What you can do is take your complaint to an appropriate place. So it's not like you can't ever say what's up, but you got to find the right outlet for it. And subordinates often aren't the ones. If the space that you're creating is just for you and your own art, then I'm not sure where you take your complaints. I'm not sure if I don't know whether, maybe you just have to sort of get yourself into a state of like, sort of not allowing the self-talk sort of thing, complaint, to occupy too much airspace in your mind, and just get on with the job at hand. Get your attention off yourself and get your attention on your art. Maybe that's another way to exhibit leadership when you're talking about your own work rather than like working with a project or team of people. Hey Will, welcome. So that was a couple of extra things that I thought about what leadership is. Line from Measure says Paul, to whom should I complain? I mean, because the thing is about complaint is that you're putting yourself in a sort of victim mentality, aren't you, as soon as you get into complaint. Now, there's a difference between complaining and expressing that something's wrong that needs to be corrected. Because you know what complaining sounds like. It sounds like sort of disempowering, repetitive, cyclical talk that doesn't really have a goal. Usually complaints start with why. Why are they doing that? Why hasn't this happened? Why blah, 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 blah. And whereas when something's wrong, you point the stuff out and say, and now what's going to be done about it? So we get things in motion, because why hasn't this been done doesn't necessarily get things moving. How can we get this thing done does. So it's not to say that you can't, if you're going to take complaint out of your life, that you can't point out when something's wrong, but you do it in a place that's more empowering. Carly says you have to work on yourself when doing it on your own, whatever that might be, different for each person. Yeah. I mean, I think just the power of being able to identify the self-talk and continually anew every time it starts to take over, to be able to recognize it and just not even do anything with it, just contextualize it. Oh, that's that voice. Because the thing is, too many of us all live as though that voice in our head, that little that's constantly going, is real, and that it is a reliable reporter of what is so, a reliable, objective reporter of what is so, and it isn't. So at times when it tells you, you know that this should have happened and it didn't, or you know that that didn't happen and it should have, and you know what that means about that person, or that this team is letting you down and you're all on your own, and whatever that self-talk may be, we have to start. Leadership is starting to have some dominion over that noise, because it isn't necessarily always helpful. And if you're thinking, what noise? Well, the one that said what noise, that's the noise. And it's training. It is literally training to observe oneself in that way. This is what one of the purposes of meditation is it's not about shutting that noise down, because it is a biological function. It is electromagnetic function, or whatever it's happened since there's been Homo sapien, basically. I'm guessing that has been there. So it's not like you now, this end of evolution, are going to be able to stop something that's been going for thousands and thousands of years. But what you can do is contextualize it, so that you can still be the space for leadership rather than complaint. Because we're all the space for something. So are you going to be the space for leadership, or are you going to be the space for complaint? Amelia says, I know this is hard to do, but I will always find a positive before a negative and say it in that order. This is because just a negative can cause arguments. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just generally measuring what you say, and this is something that I'm in training for myself, in terms of just like wanting to be better at that, of knowing when to speak up, knowing how to express something, knowing that my interpretation of something may not be what's so for the other person. Sometimes you see the start of a problem with a particular incident, but somebody else sees it as something that happened before that you might have done, that you might not be aware of. There's a really interesting, in fact, no, it's irrelevant. I'm not going to bring that up because it's too long to explain. Citizen Joke says, I think it would be useful to have external group to belong to, even if you are working alone. Yeah, I don't see why not. It's kind of, it gives you the opportunity to take your attention off yourself because you're part of a bigger group. Not so, welcome. So this is a little creativity live chat I've been doing every week. So we're talking about leadership. So feel free to chip in and join in the conversation as you feel you would like to. Fabulous to have you here. I'm just trying to get my phone open so I can just get my notes back again. Paul says, leadership and control over our own work, I can understand. How about leadership and control in presenting our work? As in, once it's out there, we kind of have to accept the reactions. I'm warm now. Have to accept the reactions. Yeah. Carly, I'm going to ask you to chip in on this because you said something interesting earlier. So Carly is a painter, and so Paul, I think that there is a mastery to giving your work over to your audience and being okay with that. Because I had this thought the other day of like, I was watching what was it? The Danish girl? The Eddie Redmayne film where he's a transsexual woman. And I was sitting with a girlfriend that I went to watch it with, and she was just like, oh, I felt like this about this moment. It just didn't really work for me or whatever. And I was just like, oh, I was okay with that bit. This was the bit that... And I realised that when you go to a cinema, say that's 500-seat cinema, there are 500 films playing. And that's a weird thought. Hey, Dinosaur. Welcome to the conversation. And Ian, hi, welcome back. Because the filmmaker has made their film, but how I receive that film, the things that I notice the first time I see it are going to be different depending on is going to be different depending on who is experiencing the film. And so if you're in a movie theater with 500 people, there's 500 people bringing 500 sets of world experiences to your work. So the filmmaker can't have any control or dominion over that because it's now my life that's coming to this film. So when you put your music into the world or your art, whatever you're creating into the world, it's not yours anymore, which is a weird thought because you're like, but I made it and it's got my name on it and I own it. You own it like as a contractual thing, but you don't own it as in people's experience of it. You can have your intention of what you wanted people to experience with it, but that might not be what they take away from it. Say Shawshank Redemption. Like, I think that's a film about hope, but somebody else might see it as a study of time or something, or whatever. So the film doesn't belong to the filmmaker anymore. It now belongs to us, the audience, which is great for us, the audience, because we can go, this is how it made me feel, and this is that. But for the filmmaker, they're like, oh, it's supposed to be about blah, why aren't you? Or they can just, commend it to the universe, give it to the universe and say, what next? Because actually, if you want to be super zen about it, about your work, your job is to let it go. Your job is to be the source of it. Your job is to go back to the drawing board once that one's out there living its life and then start creating all over again because you are the source. That's what's magic about you, is being the source of it. That, I think, is leadership, is getting that you're the source of this magnificence rather than being identified with it to the point where the reaction to it can cause you pain. Easier said than done. I get that. I remember when I first started doing stand-up, I think I might have told this story before, but it's pertinent to what you've said, is when I first started doing stand-up, the idea of stand-up is that you get like, you start with trying to get 5 minutes together, and the first 5 minutes for most people is literally anything they've ever thought that was funny, and you cram it into this 5 minutes and pray that it works, and some of it will and some of it won't. And as time goes on, you refine and refine until the 5 minutes becomes actually quite good. And then people go, oh, your 5 minutes is quite good, I'm going to give you 10. And that goes on until you get like a good 20 minutes, and then you can start doing main sets at, you know, the bigger clubs and start getting paid and stuff. Well, anyway, so I had my 20 minutes, and I was fortunate enough to get the nod from Michael McIntyre, you know, when he had his Michael McIntyre's Roadshow. And I did probably all of it, really, all the 20 minutes. And it was quite a, you know, popular mainstream show, so a lot of people saw it. And then I saw him about a month later, or maybe probably about a month later, and he was like fretting about the fact that he had to write, you know, more material, because this dude has to generate a lot of material, because does a lot. At the time, particularly, he was doing a lot of television. And I just went, I'm doing the same 20 minutes I did on your show, and he just looked at me like, sorry, what now? Because. He said something like, well, you know, if that's the way you want to roll, you know, so he was basically implying that I should ditch that 20 minutes and move on. And at the time I just sort of, you know, it was sort of a light-hearted moment, but I thought about it on my way home, and I was like, yeah, I do have to. You don't want to be this one-trick pony who's got this one routine that works and you can't do anything else. That's not how I saw myself. Some comedians do that, but that's not what I wanted for myself. I wanted to be able to do more telly. And if I want to do more telly, then I need another killer 20-minute routine. Where the hell am I going to get that from? Oh shit, I'm going to have to wipe the board and start again. And that absolutely terrified me. I can't even tell you how terrifying it was, because I thought that I was that routine. I thought that was the only reason I was successful. But as I started to dismantle the routine and put in new stuff, and it became a totally different routine, like half of it was new and half of it was the old stuff, and then 3/4 of it was new, I realised, oh, wait a minute, I'm the source of the funny. You know, it's not about the routines, it's about me every time generating the funnies. And that's what we all are. We're all the source of whatever it is we're creating. Paul, you're an incredible source of music and songwriting. So, you know, in a way, who cares what people think about your work, because you have got this unlimited access to the universe, the ideas that are just out there waiting to be birthed. Oh, shoot. I missed a load of comments. Hi, Ian. Good evening. Nonso says, 500 films playing. Boom. So true. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's what it is what it is we're all experiencing something new. Carly says, I like Paul's question. I've gone through my own journey with that. I realise when you let your work out there, you have to set it free. It's alive outside of you. It's not personal how people react. Yes, true. And they're like children, and you don't hold on to your children until they're 35. You know, once they're teenagers or old enough, you have to start letting them go and start letting them express themselves and be experienced in their own way. Whereas when a child is young, you want to manage how people experience your child. Don't touch my child. He needs to sleep now, or whatever it is. Paul says, very true. It's about letting go. And Nonso gives me a thumbs up. Carly says, yep, it's not mine. I have my internet around it, but people will find their own relationship. Intent, I think you meant. And it's out of my hands. Say bye and make the next. Absolutely, make the next. Yeah, intent. Okay, not internet. Though we do have the internet. Very good. Paul says, thanks, Carly. Okay, Amelia says, with audience view, look up hypodermic needle theory and uses and gratification theory. It gives a good explanation. Also, Bono doll experiment looks at the instant reaction of the audience. Okay. Paul says that makes sense, and Paul says, I believe it's fine. I surprise myself every time with new stuff. Right! That's the thing, that's the scary thing about being an artist, is we do genuinely think, that is it, that's all I've got, I'm out. You know, we're terrified of this notion of writer's block. Ian was talking about that the other day. By the way, Ian, props once again for cracking on with your writing. I'm so happy for you. But it's infinite. It might not always be to the quality that you want it to be, but if we let go of our expectation of what it should be, then it's truly infinite. Colzarino has joined the conversation. Welcome. Amelia says, I study media and this really helped. Great. Clive, welcome. So, all right. What else? Hang on. Let me just see what else. That was a really good question, Paul. Very, very good question. So, a couple of other things about leadership. Some of these are more in relation to how you relate to other people. I am kind of interested in this idea of ruthless compassion. So it's not being mean or horrible, but being who someone needs you to be to realize their goals and dreams and, targets or whatever. So that is a skill that I think probably people get wrong a lot. But I think ruthless compassion, which I heard Werner Erhard talking about recently, in terms of how he used to execute those old EST programs. EST? ESP? EST. Is like basically you're saying, I'm not going to take your bullshit. I'm going to be a stand for your higher level of excellence. That's what I think of ruthless compassion as. Not like being horrible to somebody or being rude or mean or whatever, but you're saying, I am making a stand for your very best self, even if you're not in that space right now. And actually, probably that does relate to how one can experience, being leadership in relation to just your own work. Because you basically have to be ruthlessly compassionate with yourself. In the sense of, when I write, it's very easy to just go, that'll do. No one will notice. And I'm trying to train myself to go, no, that won't do. If you saw that or read that in another script, you would be like, what's that? So why are you accepting it for yourself? And I think there's something in that for all of us, is like to be ruthlessly compassionate with ourselves in terms of what we're trying to create, but compassionate. Never self-flagellating about this thing, because otherwise you're gonna be your own nightmare and you're in your own head. That's too close for comfort. So it has to be ruthless compassion, together, always together. I think leading by example is another really important one, because I think a lot of us can talk the talk. A lot of us know in theory what's right. Like, there was a funny moment which really drove me mad on this advanced course thing that I was on. Like, I don't know if I mentioned, but there was a lot of self-selection going on in terms of who wanted to share. So you could just get yourself up to the mic. And there was one point where she really wanted us to do something. I think I might have mentioned this last week. She really wanted us to take on this thing that was very difficult and challenging and not many people had succeeded at. And so what started happening, instead of talking about how we could succeed at this thing or getting practical about what we were going to change to make this stuff happen, people started getting up to the microphone and going, guys, you can do this. We are awesome and magnificent. I mean, it was loads and loads of talk like that. And I was just like, this isn't getting us anywhere. We're not grounded. We're sort of pie in the sky right now. And what we really need is a bit of real talk. We're screwing up. Let's just get straight with ourselves, take account of where we are and move forward from there with a practical plan. But instead it really troubled me that we got into this. And I think that's what people want to do, is they want to get into this domain of giving advice and telling people what's so and how to do without having done it themselves. Without having walked the walk themselves, without having put themselves on the firing line. So maybe whoever said that thing earlier about asking people leadership is asking people to do things that you would do yourself. Maybe it's true. Maybe you have to have been through something yourself before you have really the right to contribute to somebody in that way and tell them about themselves. And also to come at that sort of thing with humility, because if you are telling somebody about themselves based on your own experience, it means that you screwed up at some point. So coming at advice or training somebody or teaching somebody with a sort of, well, in my day or whatever, that's kind of arrogant in a way, because you're acting like you didn't get there by screwing up. You didn't get this intel from the universe by messing up. So I think that was also leadership. Nonso says, yes, you have to be the standard of your own artistic prowess. You are the only one who can be the yardstick for your work, but then have the ability to let it go once it's out there. And that, my friend, is the truth, Ruth. But that's the hardest bit of it, is letting it go. I actually think that the letting it go process again, an exhibition of leadership is training that we have to put ourselves in. And I think maybe the key to it is just constantly doing that, of constantly sharing. I think one has to manage how one puts their stuff out there, so that you start with your expert friends, maybe. When, like, say when you're creating something that hasn't been put out there yet, but you intend to, that maybe you get advice and steerage from people who know what they're talking about, rather than the GP. Do you know what I mean? And then slowly take it, put it further and further out there till it's out there in the world. But that's training. It's life. Look, if we want to become more fully human, just have more excellent, amazing lives, it's all about training. You can't, there's no way that you can get all the riches that you want out of life without putting yourself into a difficult situation. Training means being in a position where you don't know, you can't do, feels horrible, and then suddenly you acquire some skills, and then, I can do it, and then great, but then you can't stay there, because then otherwise your training stops. So you've got to do it again and again and again. It's a nightmare. But it's brilliant. This is it. This is just it. Managers I respected the most, Paul says, haven't had an air of authority. They'll get their hands dirty too. There's an element of embracing all levels. Absolutely. And Steve says, so leaders have to sacrifice themselves for others, not trying to make a religious point. Sacrifice themselves for others. So Steve also says, do people become leaders, or do we recognize leadership in people? Well, what are we, when we're talking about, I'm not talking about the boss man type leaders here, because that is one thing, but I don't think that's particularly interesting. And I think the mainstream paradigm has a model for that, and they're welcome to that. But what I'm talking about is drawing leadership forth from yourself, and it being a gift, a service that you provide for other people around you and in your own life. So therefore it doesn't have to become about sacrifice, and in fact it shouldn't be about sacrifice. But what could feel like sacrifice when the ego is involved is actually just called being of service and being available, when you take the ego out of the equation. I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure why you're mentioning religion in the sense of you thinking of religious leaders. I couldn't say anything about that. But actually, I think it might be the same. Is like a religious leader, I don't want a religious, or if I was religious, I wouldn't want them to martyr themselves to me, to sacrifice themselves to me. I want them to be available, though. I would want them to be the space in which our church or our... I can't think of any other synagogue or, whatever, mosque occurred. That's what I would want from my leader. But I still want them to have a wife or a husband and go home to their kids and stuff. I wouldn't want them to go home and be like flagellating and thinking of other ways that they can wring their life dry for the sake of their congregation. Citizen Joke says, I don't agree. To be a leader also means to prepare to follow. There is always someone who is better or skilled than you. You do not need to have the same skill. The role is to lead. The role is to lead. Hey, wait a second. I think I agree with you. Because remember the thing I was saying about the seals? So sometimes one is in front, not physically in front, but one is in charge and another one is in charge, and they have this natural ebb and flow of like who takes control. So I don't know that... I disagree with you, Citizen Joke. Steve says, okay, I went off on a cognitive tangent. Sorry. Steve, I'm going to tick you off for that, because you do that. And you've got a very strong pull towards that. But I appreciate you being here. I really do. But try and not get pulled towards that. Nonso says, ultimately, no... None of it belongs to you. The inspiration that births your most beautiful work is all part of the universal intelligence that we tap into. All we can do is be prepared to receive it. We are, I would go as far as to say, the custodians and not the owners of this stuff. That is leadership, I think, as well. If you can accept that, wow, you're just stewarding this thing you're just the midwife delivering this thing into the world. And then share it with the audience, Nonso says. Carly says, absolutely, Nonso. Nonso says, gather what you can and share with the world. I mean, that is it, isn't it? One other thing that I want to leave us with on this conversation, because I was a bit worried about it, because I was like, what the hell do I know about leadership? But actually, thank God for you guys, because you've helped me figure out what to say on this topic and said some brilliant things as well. Paul says, I hear you, Nonso. I feel like it comes from somewhere else sometimes. Absolutely. We're channeling some serious stuff here. Amelia Cayley says, so what would you say about copyright and how entertainers earn money? Doesn't this idea infringe on that? Who said that, Nonso? Okay. All right, Amelia. So I'm not talking about, like, yes, obviously, let's never forget that there are some practical considerations when one is creating one's own art. And the universe hasn't got a copyright on the stuff that you create. But when it becomes a physical form, when it has physical form, then of course, yes, artists must copyright their work. So I don't think the two are in opposition to each other, but you got to remember what level we're talking about when we're talking about ideas coming in and being birthed through us from the universe. We're talking on a phenomenal level. When the thing becomes a material thing, then we're talking on a practical, material, real world level. But when we're talking about putting it into the world, giving it away, we're not talking about giving it away on a contractual level. We're not saying like what's his name, Moby, we're not going, hey everyone, have my music, or hey, have my paintings or photographs, or my literature, have it for free. We're not saying that. When we say give it away, we're saying give away our attachment to it. That's what that means, Amelia. So we're not talking, obviously not talking about relinquishing copyright or anything like that, unless there's something you choose to do. But no. And Nonso says, so Carly is asking Nonso who said that, and I'm assuming you mean, let me just go back. Oh, gather what we can and share with the world. So Carly's asking Nonso who said that. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of intel on where that is from, that would be great. And then Nonso also adds, the best leaders are usually not the first ones to stick their hands up to be team captain. Yeah. Been in that boat a few times. I'll do it. And then other times realizing that I'm not. Leadership sometimes is realizing that you're not the best person to lead. Cool. Good. Now, okay, guys, listen, I'm going to wrap this up, but I wanted to plant one idea. I saw a quote from Joseph Gordon-Levitt, actor, today, that said something about how it's one of our responsibilities, not responsibilities, but there's something really magical and great about, I'm terrible with quotes, sorry, but there's something really magical and great about inspiring other artists or other people to be creative. So I think that one of the other things for, artists, specifically leadership as an artist, is to be a stand for other people finding access to their own creativity on whatever level. And I think that I would love it if that's something that our little group here could do in the world, in no particular way, but however it shows up is just to be a clearing for other people to find what we know we have access to when we're kind of in that zone. That would be amazing. So if anyone's up for that this week, of just sharing a little bit of creative inspiration with the people around them, I would fully back you. And it'd be lovely to hear, next week, if anyone's got any stories to tell or anything like that, of just like, yeah, I just said to this person, write your book, and they started, or whatever it is, I don't know. But I think I really love the idea of just being a stand for other people, just accessing something awesome, because there's something magical and spiritual about when you get into a flow state with your art, and it does feel empowering and special. So I think that is something worthwhile spreading in the world. Nonso says, it was something my movement teacher at drama school used to say. Oh, okay, very good. Paul says, thanks. Fabulous. All right. So guys, listen, I'm going to wrap it up, but thank you as always, everyone, for being here on this Sunday evening. It fills me up for the rest of the week, so I hope it does the same for you. And I liked that we have a topic again. I think that seems to work. So if that's working for everybody else, then yeah, let's keep that going. And cool, there's some hearts, so I'm guessing. Thank you for joining us, Nonso. It's so brilliant to have you here. Ian says, thanks, Andy. Have a good week. Thank you, Carly. Amazing. Always to have you here. Steve, brilliant to have you here. Susan Joe says, this has been a good chat. Well, thanks. Thanks for being here, Paul. Lovely to see you as always. Well, see you, see your name here. Guys, that's it. I will be here next week, y'all. I'll have a think during the week about what the next topic is going to be. If there is anything you feel strongly like, can we talk about this? Because I feel like this is an important thing for creatives and we haven't touched on it yet. Please just hit me up. Just Instagram message me. I finally had Facebook Messenger turned off. Yes, I'm so happy. Oh God, I was getting such weird messages. Anyways, yes, guys, just have an amazing week. And if you can be a space to inspire other artists, then just take the opportunity to do so, because they will appreciate it, because they'll be able to access something awesome too. All right, love you lots, and I will see you next week. All right, bye.